Games Done Quick is the premier speedrunning marathon, showcasing hundreds of speedruns each event with the goal of raising money for charity. The marathons are hugely successful, and in their decade of existence, there have been no known instances of players cheating live on stage until Games Done Quick 2022. The run in question was one of the standouts of the event, with highly entertaining commentary and high chat engagement. So when it came out that a portion of the run wasn't legitimate, it was met with disappointment and frustration. Today we'll be looking at how this run happened at a live event, why the runner did this, and the fallout from everything that occurred. I hope you enjoy today's video. Before we get started, I'd like to highlight a couple of things. The run in question was done by one person alone. The commentary team didn't have knowledge of what was going to happen, nor did anyone else. And as always, don't contact anyone discussed in this video. When the COVID-19 pandemic started, GDQ moved their events to online only. This meant that runners would be performing runs on their own setup instead of the hardware provided at the marathon itself. At a pre-pandemic event, if a player wanted to cheat, there were considerable barriers to the common methods of doing so, as it would be near impossible to load up a task or splice a run in a live setting, as you'd need access to the hardware that the game would be streaming from. When the marathon went online, there was some concern that a cheated run would happen due to remote runners having a large degree of control over their setups and no oversight being present. But 2 years of online events took place, and no instances of cheating or tampered runs were found, until SGDQ 2022, which brings us to the run in question. The Metal Gear Rising Revengeance run was slotted in a prime time slot on Thursday, June 30th, where runner Meka was set to play through the core game, and because a donation incentive was met, the Blade Wolf DLC as well. The run opens with Meka declaring that we're about to witness God Gaming, where he's going for non-marathon safe strats, and then discusses some of the highlights of the game's mechanics. At the beginning, Meka makes it clear that he's not running with a controller, and will be playing on keyboard and mouse instead. And you'll hear button mashing and loud key presses made throughout the run.
Button, not intended by the way. And then he just gets out of it and he can run freely, saves quite a little bit of time.
Keep this in mind, as we'll be coming back to this detail later. For the main game, Meka is silent throughout the run, focusing on the gameplay while the couch narrate the details of the run, and they do a fantastic job of explaining the strats being used. But the point that should be noted is Meka's silence while he plays. As the run progresses, the chat and live audience are having a blast, with the game wrapping up under estimate. So was this run God Gaming, or was it a cheated mess? This run was actually legit and clocked in at a top 20 time compared to the leaderboard, which is a very good time in a live setting. But what happened next is where things start to get fishy. In addition to the Metal Gear Rising Revengeance run, Meka was also running the Blade Wolf DLC, a run that was allowed to take place because a donation incentive was met. Despite how active and awesome they were, Meka dismisses the couch as he goes into the DLC run and says that he will now show everyone God Gaming and high-risk strats. Before the run starts, he says he needs to replace the saves and then loads up the first save slot, but then changes his mind and loads slot 2, saying that slot 1 had important things he couldn't lose. The first thing you'll notice about this run is that Meka is much more active in explaining what's going on, and I'd like you to pay careful attention to the clips I'm showing you to see if you can catch some oddities before I reveal them. He speeds through explanations as fast as the gameplay is going by, and reacts to tense sections of the run as he completes them flawlessly.
No. Perfect.
He arrives at the final boss and informs the audience again that he's not using any safety strategies and hopes that he doesn't choke, and clocks in a final time of 6:55, which appears to be a world record. But Meka addresses this.
But hey, can we not use the world record stuff, right? Because you see, it's very misleading. And it assumes that the video that I've done here is the fastest time, when in fact someone else could have a faster unrecorded version.
When the host asks if he has any final words, he recites a speech that he had written ahead of time that lasts for 3 minutes before the curtain finally drops. I'll link the entire speech below, but the line we need to focus on is this one.
Some of my marathon runs are remembered by something I've done near the end of them, and this run won't be an exception.
So what did Meka do at the end of this run that he would be remembered for? There were 2 red flags with this run. The first is how engaged he was with commentary while doing gameplay compared to the first run, and the second is that the keyboard sounds that were prominent and even featured in the first run are almost non-existent in the DLC run. These two facts alone aren't enough to definitively say that the run wasn't legit, but if we look at the beginning of the final boss fight, we'll see that something is missing. Here it is compared to a legit run of the game. If you didn't catch the discrepancy, in the legit run, a checkpoint loading animation appears as you enter the boss fight, but in Meka's run, the checkpoint isn't present. So how was this possible? The only time a checkpoint doesn't load in the game is when the player has already visited the screen during a playthrough, meaning that Meka had already seen this boss. But if the run is live, how is this the case? If we go back to the start of the run where Meka was talking about what save to load, he actually loaded up a segmented run of the DLC, meaning that he wasn't playing it live. If you're unfamiliar with what a segmented run is, it's where runners grind sections over and over to near perfection, and then splice everything together to show what a near-perfect human-performed run would look like. These types of runs used to be popular in the early days of speedrunning before streaming, and when video uploads weren't the easiest things to do, but have largely fallen out of popularity, although some leaderboards still have categories for them. If you're skeptical about the run being segmented, look no further than this clip where Meka takes his hand off the mouse while the camera is still moving. He notices this slip up and covers by saying that he was using his left hand.
And eyes on his on his head, and obviously moving the mouse with my left hand was a different experience. Alright.
This wasn't detected at the time of the run, but a few days later, Meka would be confronted with the finding once it had been identified, and he admitted that he had used a segmented run for the DLC portion. It's not against the rules at GDQ to play runs that aren't live, as there are task showcases and other types of hybrid runs shown off regularly. But it is against the rules to tell the organizers that you're doing a live run and then pretend to play over a pre-recorded and edited run while passing it off as being done live. The big question on everyone's mind was, why did Meka do this given that he just spent an hour doing a legit run? So let's see what he had to say. After being caught, he contacted GDQ and informed them that his run wasn't done live and apologized for his actions and explained that part of the reason he did this was because he thought only a perfect segmented run could top the run he had just done. When GDQ became aware of this, they pulled his run from their YouTube channel, with Coolmatty putting out a statement on the matter. He contacted our staff with a document detailing that he had planned this out for over a month, demonstrating this was planned and intentional. This was made possible because of the remote nature of this particular run in the marathon. He goes on to say that Meka didn't believe that GDQ would be willing to speak out about what he did, but that it was in the community's interest to know why the run was pulled, and that Meka will not be permitted to run in the future. The GDQ statement also said that Meka's goal from doing this was unclear, but a few days after this happened, Meka joined a call to explain his actions. It's an hour long, so I'll summarize the details for you. He had been working on the segmented run for 2.5 months ahead of the GDQ run, and the decision to play it live came at the last second. He doesn't feel bad about what he did, because he did it for passion that he has about speedrunning. He acknowledges that he doesn't deserve forgiveness for what happened, and again states that passion drove him to do this, but realized that it did more damage than he thought would come from it. He goes on to say that playing the segmented run was a means to an end to show off the game's maximum potential, and that it wasn't his intention to pass it off as a real run. If we analyze this, we'll see that it doesn't sit right given his actions. First, if the decision to play the segmented run came at the last minute, then why did he justify it by saying it was to show the game's maximum potential, as this implies some thought had went into doing it beforehand. Second, if it wasn't his intention to pass it off as legit, then why react to things happening in the run as if he was performing them in real time? And why act surprised when you find out that the time was a world record?
Looks like a 6:55.
Holy shit. Kind of like a world record.
He cites passion a number of times and goes off on some very bizarre tangents that are hard to follow. So to try and clarify things, I reached out to Meka and he took the time to answer some questions I had. When I asked why he did it, he maintained that the run itself wasn't cheated, as he didn't intend to submit it to the leaderboard, and that he had planned on being caught because he had made preparations on being called out by sharing with someone that he had been working on a segmented run a few months prior to his GDQ run. This isn't to say that the person knew what Meka was going to do, just that he made someone aware that he was making a segmented run, with his idea being that this person would call him out when they identified he had played that run at GDQ. I think that answers the question as to whether this was a last-minute or planned decision, but he went on to say that part of the reason he did this was to bring attention to the community at his own personal cost. I wanted to dig in more on why he made the decision to do this, and he replied that his earlier statements about it being a last-minute or planned decision were contradictory, but that the real reason was to do something that nobody expected for the sake of passion. I was having a hard time following his reasons when he kept coming back to passion, so I don't think it's worth going into any more detail about why he did it, so I'll leave that up for you to decide. But there's one thing he said during his speech that I'd like to return to. He says that contributions to speedrunning matter more than status or positions on a leaderboard, and the players that find new strats and make games more accessible to new runners are who should get the focus instead of people that make world record history videos. Aside from feeling personally attacked by that last line, I do agree that there are players more deserving of the spotlight, so here are two fantastic Metal Gear runners that also had runs at GDQ. The first is DLimes13, who was the first person in history to complete a rank 1 speedrun of Metal Gear Solid 2 while live at GDQ. This run is absolutely nuts and requires that the player complete the game in under 3 hours, kill no enemies including bosses, use no continues, and trigger no alerts. It's even crazier when he did the run with the added restriction of getting a game over screen if he was discovered at any point during the run. It's seriously worth checking out DLimes and the run. The other player I'd like to highlight is Joseph Joestar316, who ran Metal Gear at GDQ and also has top times across other games in the Metal Gear series. Their links are in the description, and I highly encourage you to check both runners out. If you enjoyed the content, consider supporting me on Patreon, where I just announced the next world record progression that I'll be working on. And be sure to check out my last video, where I went over how speedrunners broke the bomb in every game in the Zelda series. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.